All right, week 6, you guys. This is the last week. Anybody who's doing this online, because I've got the rest of the students in here. But if you're doing this class online, then the last day to post videos is Monday. So be sure to get your videos out there on Monday. That's funny. And if like there's comments or questions and we're going back and forth next week, by all means, we can go back and forth, but just no videos after Monday. All right, next session will start up November 16th. That's the Monday of that week. That's when classes will start back up. I am running a novice class, which will be foundations, kind of heavy. But then we are also, I'm going to run a containers / buried class. Okay. Instead of doing like exact lectures for every week, which kind of limits me to what I'm doing in classes. It's not always helpful. Yes, January, not November. I keep saying November. We're going to be doing containers instead. So George is going on a journey and everybody else is going too, because I know I've heard a lot of people struggling with containers or burieds recently. So we're going to play with that. So there's going to be drill work. There's going to be buried and containers every single week, and we're going to be making them fun again. That's the goal of that class. Okay, so getting rid of all the problems. So that's kind of what's coming up in the future. I'll get the stuff online hopefully next week and send out emails to everybody as a result. If there are openings in in-person classes, I do have a short wait list that I'll go through. And then if there's any openings past that, I'll make sure that anybody who's online, you get first kind of dibs after the people who are in those classes already. All right, so let's talk about post-trial. The week right before Christmas is kind of a great week to talk about this because there should be no trials coming this coming weekend. Everybody should be done, and this should be a perfect time for breaks, which is kind of where we're at right now. So after trial, it's a good time to take a break, guilt-free, like don't feel guilty about taking a break. It's a time for celebrating your wins, whatever your wins were from the trial or the series of trials, and stepping away from unproductive moments, letting go of problems that have popped up or managing them in a way that you can be productive about them. Okay. So it is a time, and I put a time for a good roll because Tana decided to roll as I was trying to take her photo at this last trial. And I thought it was exactly what kind of mental picture we want after trial. It's like, shake it off. Let's have fun. Let's celebrate. Let's feel good, because this is the time to start feeling good and kind of stepping away a little bit. So the first thing is celebrate your wins. Take the time to note your win, because I do find it's very easy to forget the highs and the joy that you had over the weekend if you don't make it known to yourself somehow in the future. So whether you have a journal that you write things down in, whether you have ribbons that you got from the weekend and you can post those up on a wall or your special spot that we talked about in the first week, or maybe you just put a picture, or you've got a whiteboard that you've got as your training whiteboard, you can put some sort of highlight on there. This is a good time to really like feel that good moment. And if you're floating because you've had a huge achievement, float, allow yourself that moment and allow some sort of reminder of that moment, because it is something you should feel proud of because you've worked hard for that. Don't brush it off and move so quickly on to the next thing. Allow yourself to really enjoy what you've achieved. Okay. I do talk about taking photos because that's what I do with my own dogs. I don't need a billion ribbons. I like to keep my special ones, and that's what I put up. But I take photos, and the photos help me remember those moments. It helps me cherish what's happening, or videos of those moments, right? So that can really help, and keeping track of that can be a little bit easier that way. Now, something that does happen after trials is social media, because it's very easy for us to want to post and share our successes on social media and putting our photos on there. I personally like the memories that pop up. I kind of put it on my own feed so I can see it next year and the following year and the following year. I like it. It's a good reminder, and it really helps me take note of our improvements and our changes over the years. So it's kind of fun to see that journey. But there are other things that can help you do this without being on social media. So TimeHop is an app that you can do that has that ability to do something like that. If you can figure out, I know iPhone has a yearly memory thing that you can see. I can never get it to show me what I want it to show me, but it does have a memory type thing that you can use. But there is something to always keep in mind when we talk about social media, because it is very easy to get addicted to those likes. It is a physiological response within your body, a dopamine hit. There's been way too much science and TED Talks about this. I don't need to go into it, but I want you to recognize that it does have an effect on you, whether you want it to or not. And so it can be really easy if you haven't had the best weekend, or if you haven't have these huge things that you can advertise to Facebook or whatever it might be. It's a hard sport, right? So this sport, you don't watch somebody else is not watching you. So somebody else's experiences, somebody else's successes are not necessarily the same experience that you had. So it is very easy to say, well, there was 4 passes in that search, why didn't I get one? Right? But maybe those 4 passes happened at the end of the search or at the beginning, or maybe they've been trialing for very much longer than you have, right? So there's a lot of different elements. Maybe airflow changed completely, right? So there's random little things that can affect a search. And that's kind of the nature of the sport. It's not consistent across everything. Even though judges try and keep it consistent, the experience is not the same. So if we only look at the pass rate, it can be disappointing, especially when you go to higher levels, especially when we're used to those fast hits from AKC's lower level. Well, I always queue. Why can't I queue now? Right? So that makes it a little bit harder, and it can start pushing you mentally if you're kind of expecting a lot of that qualifying rate. Right? I know, like, you guys are smart. I think you intellectually know that people will post the good stuff and then kind of ignore the bad stuff that happened over the weekend. But knowing it isn't necessarily the same thing as emotional and like recognizing what our feelings are about those kinds of things. But you also have to be aware that some people will curate what they have on social media, whether they have an image that they're trying to uphold, like teachers, right? There's a good example, like it's very curated. Or maybe there's a financial purpose. I am the first, and I wrote this right here, I'm the first to admit that my Facebook personal page has a lot to do with my business. And I will post photos of Tana's successes, maybe more than I would if I don't have a training business, because it does impact how my business runs, right? So it is something that's out there. I don't know, I'm human, right? I like having likes on my posts, but it's not the only reason why I post something on there. I do try and keep it as real. I like to look to the positive. That's kind of who I am, but I try and include, like, George's runs are not pretty. They are not like winning type runs, but I do find that there's a ton of stuff there, and there's a lot of learning, and it's the ones that I typically go back and I look at more than Tana's runs. So it is something to kind of keep in mind when we talk about social media. It is kind of a pitfall, but it's also has some benefits too. So understanding kind of the limitations of what that media is and how it affects us. So that's kind of all that I'm going to say there. I tried to figure out, do I want to talk about this or not? And I just wanted to put kind of a quick little section in there because I think it's important. And after trial is normally where it happens, right? Yes, a crack item Saturday. Yeah. So, all right. So now you finished your trial, sit on the couch, take that opportunity to enjoy your dog. This is George yesterday morning. He was tired and he just wanted to snuggle. And you know what? I'm totally into it, right? Because we worked hard, and that's what everything is gearing up for, is these trialing type of moments with your dogs, and you've been training. So take those breaks, right? So we want to do that to catch up on life balances. Right? For me, I'm like, oh, I've been putting off scheduling things. Maybe I should go schedule things. Maybe I should apply to trials, host trials. So I know Stacy was in that boat with me yesterday. We're going back and forth trying to get some of these trials getting going. But it's also a time that you can spend with family or friends that maybe you weren't able to spend a lot of time with, or just stepping away and doing nothing. Sometimes that's what's required. The weeks after or week after a big event is a good time to do it. Don't feel guilty. And kind of enjoy your dog for your dog, especially if something wasn't quite great or you had some frustrating or fighting kind of moments, because we fight with our dogs when we search sometimes. Stepping away from that and just going back to, I love you as my dog. And that's a really important thing to do after a trial. So we have the stress of the travel, because traveling to different trial sites might be a little bit harder on some dogs. Waiting at trial sites can be harder on dogs or humans. Our irregular diet, maybe we're not drinking as much water, or for me, tea, that I normally do. I normally drink like 5 cups of tea, right? So maybe I'm only on 2 at a trial, right? So all of that can affect. Being on for a long day. So some people are introverts. So being at a trial site is a little bit harder because it's a lot of people going on, and then you're trying to figure out how to balance that and not be rude because you kind of enjoy it. Or just being on focus and doing several searches throughout the whole day. That is a lot of endurance mentally. So that can be difficult. Different daily routines. Maybe you're used to having some downtime in the afternoon and then you don't have it anymore. Or at lunch. Your dog's sleep habits. Guess what? Dogs sleep most of the day. At a trial site, they might. A lot of dogs don't. A lot of dogs, there's a lot of stimulus going on and it makes it a little bit harder. And then physically being cold or hot, that can be really stressful on your body. Having a break afterwards is really important, especially after those experiences are really wet after that one trial. And then sitting or walking long distances, that can be really strenuous on your body, especially if you're not used to it. You want to come back to training because you want to train, right? Especially for your dog as well. This is not just about us wanting to train again, but our dogs need that little time back to want to come back. Okay. It's amazing what happens when you take a whole month off of training. Your dog's like pushing at you, like we need to do something. And you start training with them and they're like, it's on crack because they just want to keep doing it. That's the mentality that you want. Okay. So when do you do this? You do this after a big event. So for me, it was regionals, AKC regionals. That's a huge event. If I do summits, huge event, right? Or maybe taking a break then is because you have been training everything to peak to that moment, or a series of trials. Here in Arizona, we had Superstition Kennel Club and Border Collie Club. And before that, we had NACSW, right? So there was like a lot of trials, one after another. This is after the series of trials. This is your break moment. This is the time to regenerate and want to do this again, because we are in the middle of trial season with a tiny little break. So getting that break in there is going to be important. Ambition. What are your goals? How hard are you willing to achieve them, right? So if you want to travel and if you want to do all of those things and high placements and all that kind of stuff, you have to schedule breaks, because it is very easy to get caught up in, I have to compete, I have to do this, I have to go there. Being able to schedule that in is going to be important. Okay. Another one that I don't have in here is travel. So if you've had to travel to a trial, so I call that a big event, you're planning a lot more into it. It feels like you've invested a lot more financially into it. So it's going to have much more impact on you. And so coming back after a big travel can be very important that you take that break. Okay. All right. So after the break, your next training sessions should be very focused on success and confidence. You are building back that trust, you're building back that drive, you're building back that joy that was there before, right? So that's what we're really focused on. So if you at your trial had false alerts, guess what? You're going to know where every single hide is and you're going to call them early. If you had confidence or focus issues, your dog was really focused. My dog was finding birds, dead birds and live birds, right? So we're going to do it in a familiar space. We're going to rebuild our habits. We're going to build a lot more confidence in somewhere familiar. Then we can start pushing that generalization again. If you missed a hide, make everything easily findable. And then allow yourself to recognize that they can be found without that doubt of, well, I missed one, right? If containers plagued you, then do them with open containers, or just don't do them for a week or two. Allow yourself to build up the trust that your dog knows this sport, and then bring them back into the containers. And then if you had a really good weekend, it's less important to have these simple hides, but it's still important to always enjoy easy. I find we try and always train for more difficult things. Don't forget about the easy stuff, because honestly, it's the easy stuff that dogs take way too long to source in upper levels. So we want to make sure that they can do this at any level of competition. Okay. All right. Any questions about this stuff before we're going into growth? Anybody? We're good? All right. So let's talk about growth mindset. I have not explicitly talked about growth mindset. But guess what? This is all that we've been talking about for the past 5 weeks, because I do have a strong belief that this is what can help people feel more success and enjoyment in the sport, because there is a lot of failure. And that's kind of built into the sport. It's built into how the experiences are. And so having a growth mindset is important. So what is growth mindset? It's kind of like a keyword right now. Carol Dweck is the one who kind of talked about it and explained it and found it, whatever. It's a thing. It's not something to be found, but She's the one who described it. So what she found is that there are some students and in a class of younger students, and she found some were devastated from failures and some could just take the challenge and continue on. And they were happy about it. So what made the difference between those? And it was the belief that their mind could change. So the ones who have a fixed mindset are those who think that talent is fixed. They can never get more talent because that is the limit of what's going to happen. Those with growth mindsets believe that their mind can always be changing. You can build more talent through hard work and experience, right? And so having that belief was actually the difference of success versus having talent, which is huge. And if we can remember that piece of it, it always gives you an avenue in order to be better, in order to improve, because you believe that you can improve, right? So it's not just working within your own limitations, it's understanding that there are not limitations, that there are ways to try and figure out how to do this, okay? So that's what a growth mindset is. She did do a TED Talk. I'm not going to link to it. It's there for you guys to watch. I do highly recommend. I know TED Talk podcast. They actually interview her and they go into a little bit more detail. It's a really good one if you're trying to understand this concept. There's also a book called Mindset that's really good. I've really quite enjoyed the book Mindset, and it talks about the same concept and kind of goes into more detail about it. So a lot of different kind of things about how to think about how we do this, but they have been able to find that those with growth mindsets are typically ones that are going to succeed more. So we're going to try and aim for that, right? And that's why we're talking about being productive results after even a failure, right? Finding what we can do to move on from it. All right, any questions about that before we talk about video reviews? I've kind of rushed a little bit because I wanted to get into this video review section because I think that this is an important piece. All right, so if you record your own videos or if you have somebody else record for you, immediately after, I want you to watch them and find moments. If you don't, and because you're like purchasing the videos, write down moments that happened in that search that you want to check out on video, because it is very easy to forget about it when you're waiting a month or 2 months or 3 months to try and get your videos, right? So you want to be able to have that memory of what exactly were your impressions after the search, and then what did the video look like? So writing your little notes about that can be important, and they can be in your phone as the note feature, they can be in a journal, they can be somewhere that you tack up on a wall, but you want to be able to find those notes later when you watch your video, okay? So everybody's good on that? We're writing down notes of what our emotions are. So once you get your video, step one is watch it. You're just going to watch it normal speed, okay? The first time around, you're familiarizing yourself with this search. No, there wasn't any video recordings from the trial. So you're just going to look at the hide locations. You're going to look at your general movement. You're going to look at your dog's path, but nothing super specific. You're just kind of seeing how the search plays out, kind of like a storyline. You're just watching that story play out. Okay. You're trying to figure out what is the end of the story so that when we go back through that you have a clear understanding of where your story is going. Okay. So that's step one. Now, step two is slowing it down. And when you slow it down, I like 0.5 in YouTube. It's really kind of nice. On your phone, you don't necessarily have the same options, or it's not as easy to find those options. I do find if you upload it to YouTube, you do have those options really easily. And you can keep videos unlisted or private forever, basically, in your accounts. But so slowing it down is going to be a big piece of it. What you are looking for within that video itself might highly depend on what your goals are. So if you are struggling with focus, or if you're struggling on handling stuff, like your pressure is too much, or if you're struggling on your dog's alerts and false alerts, you might be looking at something slightly different through the whole searches, right? And so then we might slow down and really kind of go back and forth on different things. But in general, these are the pieces that I'm looking for. So if somebody asks for a video review, this is where I break down and we look at. And typically, if we can find these different things, it will normally lead us to an answer of what's going on within the search if it didn't work, or maybe we can understand exactly why things worked really well. So step one, are they working or not working, right? So if they are not working, is it displacement or generally just not working? Are they just non-interested in the space? So when is your dog not working? Are they really not working, or did you just think that in the moment? Because it is very easy to think your dog is not working. And then when you actually look at a video, you go, oh, they were working odor the whole time, and I was just in their way. And maybe you're not recognizing that, and I can help you see that. So what working looks like, right? Your dog will likely have a nose leading versus eyes and ears. The head's kind of a little bit of a different direction. The nose is leading, the nose is forward. They're normally going to be following some sort of invisible path that might include some objects, but will also include changes of direction or speed changes along open spaces, which aren't normally making sense. The nose might be low, level, or higher. That gives you that hint of where the odor placement is. Now, if they're not working, you're going to see typical displacement behavior like sniffing the ground, crittering, handler focus, environmental focus, shake-offs, lip licking, and yawning. But what's interesting is these are stress responses that can happen as a result of working odor. So they're not necessarily only not working, they might just be processing. And that's how your dog processes information. And so recognizing that can be really important. So when you see these kinds of things, take note of when does it happen? Is it response to a specific hide placement, right? So your dog is starting to source, they're trying to figure it out, and then they start sniffing the ground. Okay, maybe that gives us information that that hide placement was difficult for your dog. Maybe it was a one-time learning event and the dog figured it out and they got it, and now it's never going to be a problem again. Cool, awesome. But maybe it's something that we need to set up in training to make sure our dog can understand that problem in the future. Specific odor puzzle. So maybe it's converging, maybe it's a high hide, maybe it's a blowing problem, right? So we can recognize that. Maybe it's in response to your handling decision. You decided to step forward, or you decided to not turn, or you decided to continue forward and your dog was trying to slow down, right? All of that can create non-working type moments. And so we have to recognize when that working switches to not working, or not working is switching to working, because that's going to be a lot of information. So here is a lovely container search. Definitely not the prettiest search ever. Okay. There's a lot of issues that happen in the search, including I can't find my card, including I call alert or finish after the second hide and it's an excellent class, right? So there's a lot of things going on. But what I remembered when I went into the search with George is that he was running around. He was just high. He was just high arousal. He wasn't really working. Now I want you to see he's actually working. And when I saw the video, I really started recognizing that he was working odor. So all I see right now is him going to distractors in the middle of the space. And I know he was picking them up at last trial. So that's all that's in my head in the moment, right? He's working odor pretty nicely through here. And all I see is he's going fast and he's going to a wall and he's going fast and he's going to a wall, right? He's running down the hall. Why did he run down the hall? Anybody know?
Odor draft.
Totally. Odor was shooting down that hallway. And he did it the second day too. So guess what? Second day, I understood what was happening. I had more empathy to what he was doing. I didn't necessarily change the result, but I understand what's happening now. So now I have a better plan on how to train versus just going, oh, I don't know. He was just pulling me everywhere. Why can't he just work containers? Why can't he just put his nose on the containers? And now after I watched this, especially this moment in here, he's working odor really nicely. He's actually trying to figure out this odor plume. And you can see I actually start letting go of the leash a little bit because I'm starting to understand what's happening. I'm involving him. Did I need to step in? Probably not. Actually, he was probably working odor much better than I thought he was. Right? Not a pretty search. I'm going to show you until he finds one hide. Right? So finally, he figured out where all of that stuff was coming from and he centered in on one hide. He did pretty awesome. He was working that one hide for a long time and he knows that there's two other hides in there. Yeah, working, not working is a whole class. Yeah, so does this make sense to you guys? Like this is that working, non-working moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So you knew after you watched the video, so for the next day that he was chasing odor down the hallway. So if you know that going in, how much room do you give him to find that edge? Like, do you let him find the edge or do you just hold?
In his situation, I held because I knew for him, he doesn't have the skill of working containers close yet. I have a lot of work to do before he can do that. But the understanding of what he was doing allowed me to see the whole search differently. I had much more empathy, I had more information, and I was much more interactive versus frustrated with the result. Does that make sense? And so it changed for a trial experience. It changed my thought processes on the results. It wasn't just, we have to work more because my dog's not working. It was, here is the problem of why my dog is not working, and this is what we need to do next. Could it change the result for the next day? Well, yeah, we got a qualifying run the next day, but more so it's creating my training plan. Does that make sense? Go for it, Val.
So I was wondering what you think about, I've heard some talk about a container search is more of a selection process than a search.
In a way, yes.
And so the idea being that you keep your dogs on the containers
Mhm.
and not let them go off down the hallway or whatever.
Right.
Do
It
you
really,
think that has any benefit to teach them that?
yes. So it really depends on the dog. I can tell you, if I started him with pairing methods, because I didn't start him with pairing, I started with him with pure drive for odor, because that's kind of like how I like to train, and I kind of enjoy that thrill. But I do think if I started him with pairing, I would have a much more controlled and much more slow, essentially, container search. I don't think I would get the same joy that he has. He still has a lot of joy for this, even though it looks really chaotic. And if you do it more of a pairing method, it keeps them much more on the containers, because that's where the value is very closely, and they're not working, pairing meaning food right beside the hide in the same container, and they eat the odor when they go to the open container where the hide is. And you do it with open containers, and you build up that value of just checking really closely. But I do think that creates a lot more of the selection process, because they're only thinking about that. For him, it is not a game of selection. He is working multiple objects in a room. Do you guys see what that looks like, right? So if I show you a video of Tana, it is a selection process. She goes down, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, right? That is a selection process. And when they are sequential like that, that's what they're doing. That's the ideal. But it really depends on the type of dog, because I do find air centers are going to look at search areas much more like this until you put enough patterning on them that it becomes more of a sequential search. Versus other dogs will come into it as a pattern very quickly and will do that selection process right from the very beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I mean, how do you know what you have?
You could tell
Because
pretty quick if they're going to be air scenting and just moving to odor and coming off the line very easily as soon as you just let them go. Or
because I think Trig air scents a lot.
I think so too. So I think he's more working odor, but I don't know.
And I also didn't train him with pairing. I trained him, you know, like to just find odor.
Yeah. And it depends on how much patterning they've done. How many times have they gone down a line of containers for the impact of how they're going to work those containers? Yeah. It's a complex concept for sure. And I think this is why containers drive a lot of people bananas because it can be so variable for each kind of dog. All right, so, pairing. Look, we just talked about pairing, so that's when food is beside your hide. So Christy has a question. In agility, many will excuse themselves immediately if the dog breaks at the start line. Guidelines when just leaving is the smartest option. Yeah. So it depends on the dog. It depends on your goals of the search, right? So an example, Kathy, I'm going to use you. Example is this weekend. Her last run of the day was exteriors. She knew her dog was going to get stressed and triggered by the ground, period. She knew that that was going to be a stress, and it wasn't necessarily going to be a great search for her. And she just had an awesome search and got her elite title. So she made a choice of not doing exteriors. And that's a hard choice because we paid the money. But that's an example of just like, I'm going to walk away because I know what this experience is going to turn out, and it's not healthy for either one of us. Cool, we're going to walk away, right? And you take that risk if you know that that is a possibility for you and your dog. Talking about containers, it's definitely like it's very tentative. I find some dogs you can like in the middle of like, hey buddy, you're just going past containers, you're not working, come back, we're going to work. And then you get them working down that line and they go bang, 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 bang. And we had that this morning for a young dog. And it was very cool because he was just like, we're just running, we're just searching. And I'm like, nope, bring him back. And he just went down the line and hit every container in a row, perfect alerts. And for that dog, he knew what was expected and he just held him accountable to it. He was totally happy. If I did that to George in this moment, I wouldn't get any better result. I actually probably would get a more frustrated dog and a frustrated handler. So it's just kind of recognizing that piece. Pulling him out of the search wouldn't change it. I have an arousal problem that I need to work. And I have a chasing problem. And so guess what? Patterning containers is our answer. So, so as a judge setting hide, would you use a close in a room? What are you talking about, Wendy? Unmute, mute, Wendy.
I'm looking for it. A closed-in room instead of having one that has a hallway, have doors on it so that it doesn't get away down the hall.
You could, but I don't think it really affected essentially because this could be set up in the middle of a cafeteria or in the middle of a gymnasium with slick floors. It's not going to change the problem, right?
Yeah.
The problem's still there. So
yeah. Okay.
So I've shown this video, right? Because it's like, for me, it was my aha moment from this weekend. And it's just through video review of watching the video, knowing my problem, that can give me this aha moment for him. Here's the hint. I'm doing container searches, making containers fun again. George is running through this class with everybody who's doing online. Like we are running through containers because my own dog needs it. So I'm going to video everything that I'm doing and everybody else is running through it too that wants to play, or buried. Same thing. So just so you guys kind of know where we're going, a lot of this kind of talk about containers is what we'll talk in that container class because there's so many different pieces to it. And it all depends on the dog. So, okay. So when we go through this, we talked about working, not working. Chasing was actually working, right? And it's not necessarily obvious right away. All right. Second thing that we're going to look for is change points. Where does your dog make an obvious change of behavior? These change points are huge to recognize. More you can recognize them in person while you're running, the better. But when we look on video, sometimes these change points are subtle. Sometimes we're not recognizing the impact of them at the moment because they didn't really necessarily make a logical sense in the moment. But we can start training ourselves to see them the more that we go through trial or video reviews, because the more we can train our eye of what our dog looks like in converging odor or in blowing odor, in pooling, when they're working past a hide to another hide and you go, oh, that's what he looks like when he passes and half works a hide and then moves on, right? So you can start training your eye on what to see in those moments. So we're looking for change points. The most common change points that we see, and these are normally the ones that we can recognize in the moment, are change in direction, change in speed, and change in head level. The head level is a little bit less. The harder to see ones is tail carriage, mouth open or closed, quickness of breathing and movement, and also stutter steps, like half little, like going back and forth. Those ones we don't see necessarily right away, right? So having these kind of change points and recognizing what they are in video and where we can slow it down and see them at our pace, because dogs, if we're watching it at 0.5, we are now watching it at the dog's brain speed because we think so slow to our dogs because we're not processing as quickly because we've got more that we're taking into process. All right. We're also looking for handling decisions and the impact to your handling decision. Okay, so you're trying to take note of your own decisions. When do you decide to lead? When do you miss picking up on your dog's changes of behavior? When do you start to open up? Okay, so we're trying to look for those things. So some handling choices that we might see is tension or slack of your leash, movement or not movement, position and orientation within the search. Where are you facing? Where are you standing? Is your pressure causing your dog to work or not work a space? Feet direction, hands up or down, head and shoulders, where are you facing, distance between you and your dog, and response time to the dog's changes of behavior, right? So all of these things are handling decisions that we make. And because of the handling decisions, what we can see in video is we can really see and go back and watch it again and again, your impact to your dog. And it allows you to start being much more aware of your own actions because you can see the result. And then you can kind of test those things when you go back out and you can start recognizing the result of that. So the impact that we're looking for, displacement moments, or when your dog leaves odor or false alerts, right? So we can start recognizing some impacts. And then I want you to recognize sourcing or lacking of sourcing, which typically happens when false alerts are happening. You start recognizing, oh, that they didn't actually source. They didn't actually come to a point. They just kind of went and then they lifted up and they looked like it was an alert, right? So we can start recognizing those things. And then I want you to recognize, especially if you're videoing your training, does your dog ask questions and you're not recognizing them because you already have an answer and you don't realize that they're asking that question? Recognize what your dog's questions look like. Typically they are lookbacks and kind of asking. And if you take a step forward, that's information. But then in a trial, you get this look back and you go, what does it mean? And your dog is used to you taking a step forward to help them through a pooling problem or help them through a fringing problem, right? And then do they source to a point or a generalized area? Okay, so these are your lists. This is what we're looking for. And yeah, it's not super clean. Yeah, it's not super like organized. But these are the big points. Handling moments, changes of behavior, or change points, and sourcing. That's what you're looking for. And so then once we see those things, we're starting to understand the signs. Okay, we're starting to understand what's happening. You're learning your dog's own tendencies on source versus near source. You're recognizing your own impact, and you're going to start finding moments to train or proof. Okay, so then you're going to notice, does your dog struggle with a sourcing a specific hide? Right? If you're watching trial videos, you're going to see this thing pop up. Does your dog need more work of a specific skill? Right? Specific area, whatever it might be. Do you need to proof past your dog to your pressure? Like we can see that in a video very easily. Working on time between found hides, right? So your dog, we could see on the clock how much time has elapsed. Oh, we're at 25 seconds again. Yep, they're going to look at you. Okay, now we're at 25 seconds again after hide. They're going to look at you. Yep, they're looking at you. Right? We can start seeing that. We can start setting a timer and really see it moment. Or after the last hide is found and you keep pushing the space. And then does your dog need to work focus in distracting environments? You can start seeing that cleanly through video because it's like, well, he did fine in this space and not this space. Why can't we do exteriors? Well, then we start seeing what your dog is paying attention to and we can start seeing that piece. And then specific distraction that we have to proof against. Okay, even in those container videos, my dog found the toys interesting. Maybe I need to work them. Maybe there's odor information, right? So then I have to explore that a little bit more. All right. So I'm going to use, I've got two videos that got submitted today, and I want to use them because I think we can talk about some of these things. So here is a trial video of containers from this weekend. Same room. This is a master's container. Kiki found one out of the three. And I'm going to try and remember.
I have to jump back on because I lost you. I don't have video.
Okay. I'll add you back in. And I'll try to not play too much. All right, so we see the whole search area here. And I'm going to try and remember where the hides are. So one hide is in this bin here. I believe there's one in this black bag. And is the other one in this black bag? Anybody else who ran that search?
It's in a black bag and a blue bag.
Yeah. I'm pretty
Is
sure.
it that one?
Need to figure out how to get back on.
I think so, Alex.
Okay.
It is that one.
I didn't think that they were close. I thought that they were kind of spread out.
Yeah.
All right. So in this situation, we've got a tall container here. We have a tall container here. And this is a tall container, right? So we've got high, low container search stuff, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to watch her as she works these search areas to see if there's some things. Kathy, do you need me to kick you out so you can get back in?
Yeah, because I can't even kick out, but I just
Okay.
give me a minute so I can watch so I can hear what you're saying.
I'm like, this is your video. Do you want me to remove you?
Yeah, but then
Okay.
I'll do it real fast.
And then we'll add her back in. So what we're going to do is we're going to play through it steady speed, And then we're going to play it through at half speed and start picking up some of these changes. Now, the video is GoPro, so it's not as easy necessarily to see as if it was a video just kind of in like off to the side. Totally agree, Michelle. The odor that's sticking to these chairs, you even saw it in George's search, the odor along these chairs. And then the second day they left some of these doors open. Oof, it was brutal with some of those open doors. Like all the dogs were chasing odor into the rooms.
Yeah.
And it really shows you what's happening is that room is so saturated with strong AKC odor that they're trying to find edges. They're trying to find where odor isn't so that they can find a line back in because it is so saturated. And then it's carpet, right? And they've had 8 searches on this by the last searches, master searches on the second day. So you can imagine how much odor is around. All right, so we're going to play this video, just regular speed. We're going to watch how she goes around. So she's checking containers, cuts across here in the middle. Oh, so that's the one that she comes. Okay. So she finds this
Straight
guy
out.
here. And then odor information. Okay, cool. Kathy's leading a little bit, trying to get her down the line. And then she's leading around the corner. Kiki is. Little check-in with mom. Trying to remember where that other one is.
They're both on the other side.
Okay, so it's this black
That
one,
one
that blue bag.
and the blue
This
one.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm correct, right? Anybody that ran it?
I know it's the black
I
one.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
Kathy, did you point at one of the containers to
Mhm.
point to her, to direct her to go look?
Yes.
So what's the viewpoint about pointing? Just
Presentation.
I'm-
So
Just like-
presentations are a great way to ask your dog to check a missed container, especially at the upper levels. In the lower
Okay.
levels, when you have like one hide, maybe two black bags and the blue tall one. So the two, and then you
No.
Yeah,
I
I
know
think
which
the
ones they are.
black bags were on opposite sides though, I believe.
none of us know where that other hide is.
We know
this
it's that
one for
blue
sure.
one for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
It was the blue one. Christy's like, it was the blue one.
No, I know it was that, and I know it was the big tub for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's
But-
this one, it's this one, and then the blue tub.
Are y'all in concurrent agreement?
I
About
think
the
so.
black one?
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
All right, so we're all on the same boat. All right.
It was a blur by that point.
Oh, I
don't know.
get it. All right, so as we went through, we saw like there's some odor information, nothing super concrete. She was working that space trying to figure out the problem. Okay, so now let's going to slow it down. Now we're looking for change points because this is going to give us some information. So as she comes in quick and she immediately slows down. Where does she come off of the containers?
The chair area,
Where's that hide?
the blue one.
Right there. The
Right
blue-
off. She's trying to find an edge and then she comes back on. This is stuff that happens around hot containers. Now, can you say it's always going to be that way? No, but this is a tiny little piece of information that she's giving us, is that as she's coming in, she's trying to find that edge and she's now going back down the line. But watch what she does immediately after this. She comes off. I have a feeling if you stepped back in this moment, she's actually trying to turn around here.
Oh,
Because what she did is she came down here, she's finding an edge to this hide and starting to turn slightly. If you step back, and it's not something we would normally do, but I have a feeling if you step back, she would circle back and try and understand where this was coming from.
but then she immediately, doesn't she
Yes.
catch the one right across?
Right. And this is where you have the lure of a new one. So here we've got a change point. She's going from one hide, edge of the odor plume, and then it's almost like she circles to the other direction. She's like, oh, I'm in the new one. Okay. So let's watch and see how that happens. She's like, oh yeah, look, there's that one. And then we can also see she dropped her nose in the middle, which is an indication potentially of some converging odor. Right? So she gives you a nice clear alert. Look how happy she is. I got it right. Right? And then we ask her to go out and search again. Okay. She's going off to the side again. I think this is trying to find a clean corner that maybe she can grasp. And then she comes back in, and I think this is to the blue bag. And you're kind of leading here,
Yeah.
which might override her working this odor information in the corner. Because it kind of became, and we saw how George worked it, it kind of became more of an odor problem. And she slowed down. Here's our slowdown near the other one versus a container problem. Just thinking. So now she's coming back to the known hide and she's looking at you.
And she's looking at me. Yeah. So she's like, I don't think there's any more. I interpret it as I don't think there's any more odor, mom. And I'm trying to trust her more as part of my SMART goal.
Yep. So as she came in here, this look at you. So looks at you are always information. So in this moment, I think it was she was coming back into the known hide and the rest of it was confusing. So in here, you didn't do much and she turned back around to be able to try and work this. But I want you to notice, where's your dog? In front of you or beside you?
Up to the
Yeah.
right.
Right. So this is why, like, even if we have a GoPro mount, I could tell you where your dog is. Your dog is not in front of you leading the search. Your dog is now getting pulled through the search. Right. So then you bring her back in, you connect back with her, and we start working it a little bit. And good, you step back here, but you're almost overturning. There's odor information. Same thing happens on here. So the odor is in the chairs, and it's just a matter of just kind of a little more patience to let her work into the chairs to help her with this problem. I think you're expecting this huge change of behavior on top of the container, but she's like 4 or 5 inches above it.
It's like she just refuses to sniff the blue one. Like she has
Same
gone.
with this black one. Because she's like, the edge of it should be here. And I think it's strength of odor that's causing some of this. Because if we watch, she actually doesn't put her nose on the hot containers.
Right.
She's working the edges of them, which is not uncommon. And she's like, I found that one.
She's like, what are we doing, mom? I'm just interpreting this as me keeping her in too long and there's no more odor.
What's interesting is she's only looking at you really on that line. Like this back side, she's not looking at you when she's in the other stuff.
Oh, that's interesting.
So now you're overturning again. And I think it's pressure moving her down the line slightly. She's slowing down, catching odor on the edge of that. That should be a little bit of a turn. And she didn't give it to you.
And then I'm like, here, you didn't sniff this one. It's like, I don't want to, there's nothing there.
So then now we get into training aspect, right? Flat container, she's not inhaling at the seam, which is kind of what happened to that one. It became a little bit hard. Totally agree. We didn't have many options. And the odor information wasn't like being swept away off containers. I think when we're used to larger spaces with more air movement, this is carpet, small room, whole bunch of stuff that's being caught along the sides all day, right? This is at the end of the day, that there's not a lot of movement off the containers. And so the odor is just kind of like poof, and it's this cloud near each container. And I think it's harder for the dogs to source versus if there's a little bit of airflow, they can find that edge so much easier and they can see what's strongest versus weakest. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, see, I was just totally blown away by this because containers, I mean, out of all her elements, I mean, containers, I mean, that's the first, we had our first master title years ago in containers, you know, for her, this is her thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm just trying to trust more, be faster, don't keep pushing, hey, check here, but I didn't think we were quite done. But then I wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to trust you that you're not finding anything and call it. And then there's 2 more.
Right. I get that. And I think this kind of ends up being one of those where you walk away going, that's not something we have trained for. Right. And it's okay to have that. And that's really what's kind of at this level is you just see things that you haven't trained for. And I know I walked away the second day. I said, I have not trained this. This was a long container search for my dog. But what I have not trained for is a high amount of odor in carpet, essentially, with flat, like random flavored containers throughout the whole weekend. Right. So it definitely is a different challenge that I haven't normally challenged myself. And probably most people haven't because we don't have a lot of access to carpet here in Arizona. It's not something we see a lot of. Schools could happen, right? We could see it at a school, it can pop up again. So it is something possibly to work. Now, if you wanted to replicate this, really like quiet day, as in like no wind on grass, should really give you a very similar situation. Because you're going to have that same holding, and then you run it and you change it, and you run it and you change it, and you're changing it not necessarily where it's all on the same spot, but maybe just shift it off just slightly, so the space becomes very saturated, and a lot of spots on the ground are saturated with hides that have been sitting there for at least a half hour, but the odor picture is constantly moving. If you've got a breeze, you can't really replicate this very easily, right? A garage might be able to replicate the lack of airflow, but then you're probably going to not have the same like stickiness of odor on one source. Does that make sense to you guys?
Mhm.
So this is a very specific challenge that I don't think she knew how to work on top of flat bags, right? So we
Who
got
did-
two things.
Who did get this one?
I did. And it was because she jammed her nose. And I do remember hitting that black bag. She jammed her nose inside the pocket to inhale as she went back around. And I think I did 2 passes, 3 passes on this one. 2.
Yeah, I had like 4 passes. It was a long container search for us, and Quinn did the same thing that your dog did, like cut across the middle, which was frustrating because then, we had to make another pass to get all the.
Middle too. Which tells you that's the odor information,
Yeah.
right? There's some sort of weirdness happening in the middle of the room that's causing that cross across with dogs that typically won't cross. They typically will go down a line. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Gabe did, I didn't. You're cute, Christy. So does that make sense? Like we kind of looked at this one, we could pull it apart. We can say, okay, here's the skills that we need to look at now, and we need to train a little bit more. And that would be things like the saturation of the space and the flatness of bags, which we kind of knew. And not just that, but I'm sure the hide is not near the surface, like near the zipper. They're probably just shoving it into the bag and putting the bag down, right? And that's going to be a very different odor picture too, which is it's masters, right? And that's a possibility to show up. If this was what was advanced, it'd be sad. I'm hoping that the advanced container is a little bit clearer, but masters, yeah, this is something we could see. Yeah, go for it, Stacey.
Can I ask a quick question? So what kind of bags do you recommend, like if we're looking for bags? Because I don't have flat bags. I have some of those like little, cheapy, the ones that everybody gives you, the drawstring bags or whatever, but those don't look like they really release a lot of odor. So I've never really put a hide in there.
Yeah. I even saw them at the SKC trial when I was looking at videos earlier. So going to Goodwill, right?
Okay.
And we're just looking for purses at Goodwill.
Okay.
That's
Is
kind of
this-
what you're needing. Yeah.
Is this the club that we were talking about? They were asking for donations of containers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I remember that.
Yes. So these are people's just stuff, right? So this is Goodwill. If you want to train this stuff, it's Goodwill. Yeah.
Okay.
Flat fanny packs.
That comes with its own, comes built in with its
Yes.
own history of odor, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how you can replicate this kind of situation. Is this going to be something if you do a lot of NECSW? No, this is an AKC specific challenge, right? Because you can see this every once in a while. Dollar Store is not going to give you the challenge of the smell, which I think was some of it, especially the first day. They were a little bit interesting. And the same thing happened at SKC. Honestly, those containers were just as interesting. I had the best searches with George because they were all very weird smelling containers. He's like, look at this and look at this one. Right. Okay. So I'm going to pull up this one. This is yes zones. I'm going to talk about yes zones really quick before we go on to the other one. I can't remember who that one was. All right. So this is Master's exterior on the second day. And I do believe he's probably in the right on this one is my belief, but we're going to watch it really quick. Normal speed as he goes down the line. Change of behavior. It's coming in. He alerts, you call, you get a no. Or do you reward there? Oh, she said where.
Oh, that just pisses me off.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
under here because there's a hole in there. Okay. Okay.
Oh, mental management, hey?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't blame you. To me, totally yes zone. So I'm thinking of it as what the dog said. So let's slow it down. You got the same note. Okay, interesting to know. At least she's consistent on her ability to understand how odor moves. All right, so it's getting cooler. Temperatures were dropping. It's dark, like that sun is already set, and now we're at like the later half of the sunset, right? So as he goes down the line, his tail is kind of wagging, going back and forth, moving down. He slows down. Do you see that little pivot? Right, it's kind of an interesting little pivot. I have a feeling he may have turned even sooner if the leash wasn't on his side. So just kind of a small little effect of that leash pressure. It can affect dogs a little bit more than others. And so he turns into the leash, which I think allows him to turn around a little bit more freely with this, ducks his head, goes back in. And
Alert.
then he calls it there. So two pieces. One piece, he didn't quite source, right? He kind of made a fast decision because the odor, I think, is blowing through that hole right at his nose. But he also made a kind of a fast decision. And possibly she would be more lenient if he sourced it a lot. And that's where he made his decision versus coming in and hitting there. So then we look at where that placement is. He's like totally confident. He's like, it's here. You called your alert. And so then we can kind of see that space. So the hide where we were calling it, and I know the yeses were happening, was where this was like open here.
There's a pedal actually up there. That's the pedal. And she said anywhere up in there she would accept because all of the dogs that got it hit right on the pedal. And I watched Tana do it, and that's exactly what she did, exactly what the judge said. She stuck her nose in there on the pedal.
No, Tana's nose is right here.
Was it? It looked like it was on the pedal to me.
And that's probably what she saw, but Tana made her decision here. So it really shows you how much that odor is spread. Yeah, so I don't know. Yes zone to me, it definitely depends on time. If she had placed her hide over here, then this, yeah, totally, it could be unacceptable, right? That's a long distance. That's a lot of channeling to occur. But after it's been sitting here for an hour or more, actually, it's probably about 2 hours by the time you ran. Yeah, that's moving through like the whole top of this, especially if there's holes through this, it's totally rusted out. All through here, anything in this front half, because you can see the airflow is blowing this way based on how we ran it. Now up here would be a no, because that's not sourcing. In the backside, when it's all connected within here, that's all blowing together. So yeah, to me and to most judges, that would be within a yes zone. NECSW, here's the thing, NECSW yes zone on this, especially with how long it's sat and how the air is flowing, you probably have that as your yes zone. And if the wind was picking up, which we didn't have quite our situation, but if the wind was a little bit stronger, that's your yes zone. Just kind of understanding and building that confidence, even though you got a call that, as somebody said, you giveth and you taketh, and sometimes they giveth, and this was a taketh, right? And that's kind of the situation that kind of popped here. That's
Is
not
she an experienced judge?
no, not that much. She's judged in Idaho. That's pretty much it.
So Alex, in terms of making a quick decision to work through that, that's just, I mean, because I feel like we do. So just making sure that Gus works as close to source as possible.
Yeah, and you could set stuff like this up. Like this is a vehicle search, right? And we can set up vehicle type search like this, where you have blowing, like the example would be if you have blowing from the front and it's blowing through to the wheel well.
Okay.
Right, that
because
would be
he has
the
value for the wheel well, so he may
Yes.
have made a quicker decision based on that. That was what I was wondering.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would totally agree with that, because he hasn't had to source something that looks like a vehicle without the hide necessarily on a more alternative location. And then you can also work where you have the hide on the front grille, knowing you have like strong airflow blowing it into here and allowing him, if he makes that quick decision, come in from the side, and he has to work around to actual source without you.
okay.
Right? So that's how we could work it. That's how we could say, okay, let's break this down. Yeah, it sucks. It's a suck call, but he could have pushed it a little bit harder. So, okay, we give take, right? So then how do we make it so that even if you have a judge that gives crappy calls like that, that we can overcome that, right? So in this situation, I'd be like, okay, let's work that pooling through a vehicle. And then we get creative with our hide placements and go to Home Depot and use a whole bunch of trailers, or, you know, like if there's big equipment nearby, or you go to a park and the parks guys are there, see if you can use their equipment for a quick search.
Alex, when judges are looking, like you said earlier, in terms of seeing how their source,
Mhm.
I mean, as a judge, do you take in account to how they've sourced, like on the 2 other hides that we had already found before this one? Or is it just an individual? Does that play anything
Individual.
into it? Okay.
No, probably individual, because you don't know the presentation of the odor compared to other ones necessarily. For each dog, that would take a lot of more knowledge. Yeah, because the conditions of this one might be different, but you can see how all the dogs work the same kind of hide. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Question too.
Yeah.
So on this in particular situation, if the judge had asked where, and I know this might be a really, really stupid, silly question, but could you ask your dog to show you where, or do you have to be the person
No.
that actually shows the where?
Yeah. So if you get a where, it is not an opportunity to ask your dog to work. You have to
Okay.
have an answer, because it is a question only for you,
Okay.
right? It's a question saying, you called this, where do you think it is?
Okay.
Yeah, it really sucks that that call was being, and I know you weren't the only one, it sounds, Stacy, and it sounds like
Yeah.
she was doing the same thing on the trailer, where there's a lot of pooling, channeling, moving around, and she's not understanding. I think some of this is dry climate too. I saw a lot of dry dander on my dogs, knowing how dry it was compared to the humidity that potentially that they're used to. So they might not be as used to our climate, which then will influence how they understand odor, right? So then their experience is seeing, oh, it should hold much tighter, it should be much clearer for them, right? Versus our situations might get really mushy in times because it's moving like that. And our dogs get used to that, right? So then trying to work cooler environments can be a little bit different. Although Gus knows cooler environments better than some of our other dogs. So yeah, so that's okay. Mental game of, yeah, I don't like your call, but okay, how can we manage it? Right. And that's kind of the situation. Letting go and moving on, because we can't change a judge. Right. And that's, I think, what you put in your comment. It's like, here's an example of the judge has the last call.
Yeah.
Might not agree with them. We might understand odor, but they have the last call, so you can't necessarily make that decision. So yeah, it's a good video to kind of look at and just kind of look at, especially with this week. All right, so quickly just ending this lecture, because we've gone a little long because I wanted to watch some videos. Assessing your goals. So anybody who has made goals in week 1, I want you to look at them over the past 5 weeks and look at what have you achieved. Can you clean off, check off, adjust anything from the week 1? Look at it, was it achievable, right? So maybe it turned out that the big picture wasn't actually achievable, and we had to split out a whole bunch of things in the middle that we just kind of lumped together. And that typically happens when we have a goal of, we kind of are clear on the first few stages, and then we get a little muddy and we just think that it's just going to come. And then we realize, okay, now we kind of have to start over from where we are and clean up our training plan to try and fix that piece. And then look at, was your goal realistic? Because maybe you were thinking, oh, my realistic goal is I need to work containers. But then when we start breaking it down, it goes, oh, actually my container problem is not a real big problem. Maybe it's more of a chasing odor problem. That's my George problem, right? So then just kind of looking at what is the realistic goal of how we're going to solve this problem. And then adjust your plans to best fit the new reality. Okay, so that's kind of that piece. So I've got 3 assignments for anybody who's doing online. First one is video review. I want you to use a video and go through, and I'm going to say in here, be as concise as you can, because that forces you to really analyze what's happening without getting super narrative. I don't need a narration. I can watch the video. I want you to really like see the moment. When does it happen? What does it mean? Right? That's kind of the point to point that we need, because we can easily tell the story. That's your first book through. I want you to find the points. What are our points? What does it mean? What can we change as your summary? Okay. Assignment 2, update your training goals. Okay. So if you had a SMART, I want to hear where you're at and what you're going to do next. And then assignment 3, single hide searches. This is big, especially after a whole bunch of trials that we've had in Arizona. But if you are not, that's okay. Like, use single hide searches. But I want you to try and work on setting them. Your goal is confidence and trust. So if you have a certain hide set that you have been working on, maybe you're working elevated hides, then I want you to do whatever you're working on, but with a very like clean picture, and reduce one of the D's: duration of the search, or duration that they have to be working it, the distraction element of the space, or the distance that they are away from you, or you're away from the search area, or whatever it might be. Okay. Personally, the recovery for my dogs is blowing odor hides. I might just toss a hide into the grass. That's a lovely recovery search for my dog, because they really love to run and chase odor. So that's a recovery. It's not a training hide. It's a recovery hide, right? We are looking at different purposes for those kinds of hide sets. We need to make sure we have the joy and maintain what gives joy to our dogs within our searches. Okay. All right. Any questions before I stop the recording?